The afternoon sun was soft over the gardens of the Prime Minister's residence. Birds sang somewhere far away, and a light breeze moved the leaves. Narendra Modi had invited Lakshmi Pichai for tea. She had come dressed simply, in a plain cotton sari, her hair tied back neatly. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had seen life closely, yet spoke only when needed. They sat across a small table. The staff served steaming cups of masala tea. For a while, they spoke of normal things, the weather, the changing world, and the beauty of Chennai during the monsoon. But Modi noticed something different in Lakshmi's eyes that day. It was as if she had carried a story for many years, and it had found its moment to come out. "You know," Lakshmi began slowly, her voice calm but with a faint tremor, "when Sundar was a small boy, there was something he did that I never forgot. It is not about studies or achievements. It is about who he is inside." Modi leaned forward. His curiosity rose. Sundar Pichai was known across the world for leading Google. Yet his mother's tone suggested there was more to him than the headlines ever told. Lakshmi looked down at her cup before continuing. "He was just 11. Our family was going through a very hard time. Your life changes when you do not know if there will be enough money for the next month. We had only one fan in the whole house. Chennai summers are not easy, you know. The heat feels like it pushes you down. One night there was no power for hours, and we all sat on the floor together, sweating and tired." She paused for a moment, her eyes going far away, as if she could still feel that night. "I told Sundar to rest near the fan when the power returned, because he had school in the morning. But when the electricity came back, I woke to find him placing the fan closer to his younger brother instead. He said nothing to me. He just sat near the open window, trying to catch a little breeze." Modi was silent. This was not a story of invention or business success. It was about something deeper, an instinct for kindness that no book could teach. Lakshmi smiled faintly. "I remember asking him why. He said, 'Amma, he is smaller than me. He needs it more.' It was such a simple answer, but in that moment, I knew my son would grow into a man who would think of others before himself." Her voice grew softer, but the memory had filled it with warmth. "That night taught me that even when you have very little, you can still choose to give. And giving is not always about money or things. Sometimes it is about comfort, about care, about letting someone else breathe easier while you take the harder path." Modi's eyes reflected respect. He had met many leaders, but in that quiet garden, he felt the weight of a different kind of leadership, the kind that began in childhood, in small rooms without much light, in moments where no one is watching. "Lakshmi ji," Modi said gently, "this is not a small thing. These are the roots of a life that can carry great responsibility." She nodded. "Yes, but there is more. That was only the beginning. There was another time when Sundar, well, I think it is time I told you." The breeze slowed, and even the birds seemed to quiet down, as if the world leaned in to hear the rest. Lakshmi's eyes glistened, and her hands held the teacup firmly, as though steadying herself for the next part of the story. Lakshmi took a slow breath before speaking again. Her eyes stayed fixed on the tea for a moment, as if she could see the memory forming in its swirling surface. "It happened when Sundar was in his first year of college," she began, her voice low but steady. "Money was still tight for us. Every rupee had to be planned. He had saved 4 weeks to buy a special notebook for his engineering project. It was not just paper. It had diagrams, small handwritten notes, and hours of thought. One evening, while returning from college, he saw a boy sitting alone near a bus stop. The boy looked thin, wearing a torn shirt, holding nothing in his hands. Lakshmi's fingers tightened around the teacup. Sundar sat next to him and asked if he was waiting for someone. The boy told him he had no school to go to anymore because his father could not pay the fees. He said he liked studying but had no books or notebooks. Sundar listened quietly. Then, without saying much, He opened his bag, took out the very notebook he had saved so hard to buy, and gave it to the boy. Modi looked surprised. He gave away his own project notebook. Lakshmi nodded. Yes. And when he came home, that evening, he said nothing about it. I only found out later from one of his friends. When I asked him why, he simply said, maybe my project will still get done somehow. But if that boy has even a small chance to keep learning, I should help. She looked down for a moment. I was angry at first. I worried for his studies. But when I saw how calm he was, I realized he was not careless. He was brave. He believed that helping someone else was worth the risk to his own work. The Prime Minister leaned back in his chair, taking in the weight of her words. That is rare, Lakshmi ji. Many people think of helping only when they have extra. He thought of helping when he had just enough for himself. Lakshmi smiled faintly, but her eyes held the shine of pride. Yes, but there is something you must understand. Sundar was not trying to be a hero. He never saw it that way. He just believed that kindness was not about big moments, but small ones that we choose every day. She paused, looking towards the garden where the breeze had begun to stir again. And then there was the train journey, she said softly. That one, I will never forget. It tested him in a way neither of us expected. Modi leaned forward again, the air between them carrying the weight of what was to come. What happened on the train? He asked. Lakshmi's gaze became distant, her mind traveling back to that day years ago. It was the summer heat of Tamil Nadu. The train was crowded, and Sundar was traveling alone with a small bag. Halfway through the journey, her voice trailed off, as if even now, the memory had the power to stir emotions she kept locked away. Lakshmi's voice softened, almost as if she was speaking to herself. That summer, Sundar was only 19. He had saved some money from tutoring younger students, and he was traveling by train to visit his grandparents in Madurai. The compartments were full, the air heavy with heat and the smell of dust. Vendors moved through the aisles, calling out their tea and snacks. Sundar had found a small seat near the window, clutching his bag close. She paused, taking in the moment again in her mind. Halfway through the journey, the train stopped at a small station. People got off, and others climbed in. Among them was a woman, maybe in her late 50s, wearing a faded sari. She looked tired, her hands rough from work. She carried a small, cloth bundle. There was no seat for her, so she stood near Modi listened quietly, his eyes fixed on her face. After some time, Lakshmi continued. The woman began searching her bundle for something. I think she was looking for money to buy water. But suddenly, she dropped a small pouch, and coins rolled onto the floor. Sundar bent down quickly, picking them up and handing them back. She thanked him, but he noticed her hands were trembling. When he asked if she was all right, she said she had not eaten all day. She was traveling to see her son, who was unwell, and all her money was meant for medicine. Lakshmi's hands tightened slightly as she spoke. Sundar opened his bag and took out the food Amma had packed for him, lemon rice, some pickles, and a small packet of sweets. He offered it to her. At first, she refused, but he insisted. Finally, she sat down on the floor of the compartment, eating slowly, her eyes wet. Sundar sat there with her, not caring that people were watching. Modi's expression softened. He was just a boy then, but he understood dignity. Lakshmi nodded. Yes, but what touched me most was what happened after. When the train reached her station, she got up to leave. She looked at Sundar and said, "You gave me food, but more than that, you gave me respect." And then she placed something in his hand, a small brass coin, worn smooth from years of use. She told him it was the only lucky charm she had, but she wanted him to keep it. Lakshmi's voice grew quieter. Sundar kept that coin for years. It stayed in his wallet, even after he moved abroad. He once told me it reminded him that kindness is never wasted, even if the world forgets the moment. She took a sip of her tea and set the cup down gently. Prime Minister G, the world knows my son as the CEO of Google. But I know him as the boy who gave away his fan, his notebook, and his food without thinking twice. And there is still one story I have not told you, the one that changed everything for him. The garden seemed to still again. Even the sound of the breeze faded, as if waiting for her to speak the final memory. Lakshmi's eyes grew distant, as if she was walking back into a moment she had carried in her heart for decades. This last story, she said softly, was the one that made me truly understand who my son would become. It happened when son was in his final year of college. The Prime Minister leaned forward slightly. The air between them felt heavier now. It was the month before his final exams, Lakshmi continued. He had been working hard, studying late into the night, and also helping his juniors with their assignments. One evening, as he was returning from the library, he saw a crowd gathered near the entrance of the campus. When he went closer, he found a first-year student sitting on the ground, his face buried in his hands. The boy's bicycle was lying beside him, one wheel bent. His books were scattered everywhere. Lakshmi's voice slowed. People were just walking past. Some looked, some whispered, but no one stopped. Sundar knelt down beside the boy and asked what happened. The boy said he had been delivering part-time tutoring lessons to earn money for his hostel fees. On the way back, another bicycle hit him, and he lost a small envelope of money he had collected. Without that money, he could not pay for the next month. She took a breath, steadying herself. Sundar did not have much himself. Most of what he had was saved for his own exam fees. But right there, in that crowded place, he took out his wallet and handed the boy everything inside. The boy tried to refuse, saying, "But what about your exams?" Sundar just smiled and said, "I will manage somehow." Modi's eyes narrowed, slightly, not in doubt, but in respect. And did he manage? Lakshmi's lips curved into a small smile. Yes. He took on extra tutoring work that month, sleeping only a few hours each night. He still passed his exams with top marks. But it was not just about the grades. It was about what happened after. She leaned in, her voice lowering. Years later, when Sundar was working abroad, he received a letter. It was from that same boy. He had become an engineer, and he wrote to say that Sundar's help on that day had stopped him from giving up. He said, "You gave me more than money. You gave me the belief that someone cares." Modi's face softened. That belief can change a person's whole path? Lakshmi nodded. Exactly. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. Sundar's achievements are not only about his skills, but about the choices he made when no one was watching. Every act of kindness shaped the man he became. She looked out at the garden, her voice almost a whisper. But Prime Minister G, there is still one thing Sundar never knew. Something from his own childhood that I have never told him. It is my secret, and I am telling it to you for the first time. The breeze returned, rustling the leaves softly, as Modi waited in silence for her to speak. Lakshmi's hands rested in her lap now, her teacup untouched. Her eyes had the faraway look of someone standing in two times at once, the present and a memory from long ago. This secret, she began softly, goes back to when Sundar was just 8 years old. It was the year our family faced its hardest days. Your life changes when you have to choose between paying rent and buying food. I was trying to make both happen, but there was one day I simply could not. Modi stayed quiet, letting her words come slowly. That morning, Lakshmi continued. I counted the coins in my hand and realized I could either buy a proper lunch for Sundar and his younger brother, or pay the school bus fee for the week. I chose the bus fee because I wanted them to keep going to school. That meant the only thing I could give them for lunch was a single piece of flatbread each. Her voice trembled for the first time in their conversation. I packed it carefully, wrapping it in paper so it would not look too small. I thought they would be embarrassed to have so little, So I told them it was just a light lunch, because dinner would be special. But that day, when Sundar came home from school, I noticed he had not eaten his bread. Instead, he had quietly given it to his friend, a boy from a poorer family, who had come without any lunch at all. Modi's eyes softened, but he did not interrupt. That night, when I asked him why he gave away his lunch when we had so little ourselves, he looked at me and said something I will never forget. He said, my stomach can wait." His stomach was crying today. Lakshmi paused, her hands tightening together. I wanted to tell him then that I had made a choice between his lunch and his bus fee. But I couldn't. I didn't want him to feel the weight of our struggles at that age. So I stayed silent, and I have kept that silence all these years. She took a slow breath. Now he is the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world. He can eat in the finest places, travel in comfort, and give his children everything. But I sometimes think he does not know that when he was a boy. He gave away his lunch on the very day his mother had gone without her own. Her eyes glistened. I tell you this, Prime Minister Ji, because I believe the values that guide a person are not built by chance. They are shaped by moments like these, by small sacrifices and choices made when life feels heavy. And Sundar, he has been carrying those values his whole life, even if he doesn't know where they came from. The garden was silent again. Modi looked at her with quiet respect, sensing the weight of a truth carried for decades. "Lakshmi ji," he said, softly, "that is not just a secret. That is a gift you gave him, the kind that shapes a lifetime." Lakshmi nodded faintly, her eyes still far away. "Yes, but there is one last thing I must tell you. The day he learned the meaning of humility, not from me, but from a stranger, who changed the way he saw the world." Modi's gaze sharpened with curiosity. And who was that stranger? Lakshmi placed her hands gently on the table. Someone he met when he least expected it. Lakshmi's voice was calm, but there was a quiet weight in it. This happened many years later, when Sundar was already working abroad. He had come to India for a short visit, and one afternoon, he decided to walk through the old neighborhood in Chennai, where he grew up. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, nothing that made him look important. He just wanted to feel the streets again, to see the tea stalls and corner shops from his childhood. She smiled faintly. As he walked past a narrow lane, he saw an old man sitting on a small wooden bench. The man's clothes were worn, and his hands were dusty, as if he had been working with bricks or cement. Sundar noticed the man was struggling to open a bottle of water. Without thinking, he went over and offered to help. The man looked up, nodded, and let him twist the cap open. Lakshmi's eyes softened. After drinking, the old man said, "Thank you, son." Sundar smiled and replied, "It's nothing." But the old man shook his head and said something that stayed with him. He said, "Nothing is the biggest something when you don't expect it." Modi's brow lifted slightly. They sat together for a while. Lakshmi continued. The old man asked Sundar where he worked. Sundar hesitated. He didn't want to make it about himself, so he just said he worked with computers. The man nodded and said, "Whether you work with computers or carry bricks, the world will only remember how you made them feel. The rest fades." Then he stood up and left, walking slowly down the lane. Lakshmi paused, her voice low. That day, Sundar told me later, he realized something important. He had spent years working on big projects, meeting important people, solving problems worth millions of dollars. But that old man's words reminded him that even in the busiest life, kindness was still the real measure. It was the thread that connected all the moments that mattered, from giving away a fan, to sharing a notebook, to offering food on a train. She looked at Modi, her eyes steady now. And that is why, no matter how far he has gone, son remains the same boy I raised, the one who believes his stomach can wait if someone else's is crying today. The Prime Minister nodded slowly, as if each word had settled deep in his mind. "Lakshmi ji, You have not just raised a son. You have raised an example." The garden was still again, but this time it was a warm stillness, the kind that comes when a truth has been spoken and nothing more needs to be said. Lakshmi smiled gently, her hands resting on the table. "Thank you, Prime Minister Ji. I only hope these stories remind us that success without kindness is empty, and kindness, even without success, is still worth everything." And somewhere in the soft breeze, it felt as if the past and present had joined hands, the small acts of an unknown boy, carried quietly into the heart of a man the world now knew. Days after their conversation in the garden, Narendra Modi had a chance to meet Sundar Pichai in Delhi for an official event. It was a formal setting, ministers, diplomats, and cameras all around, but in the middle of that formality, Modi carried the quiet weight of Lakshmi's stories in his mind. When the speeches were done, and the media had stepped back for a moment, Modi walked over to Sundar and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your mother told me things," he said softly, "not about your work, but about your heart." Sundar looked surprised. "About my heart?" Modi smiled faintly. "Yes, about a fan, a notebook, a train journey, a piece of bread you gave away, and an old man who told you the real measure of life. She wanted me to know that success is not built in boardrooms. It is built in moments when no one is watching." Sundar's expression shifted, part humility, part emotion. "Amma told you all that." "She did," Modi replied, "and I think you should know. Her stories are not just about you. They are about the India she believes in, the values that shaped you. They are worth sharing with the world." For a moment, Sundar stood silent. He thought of the brass coin from the woman on the train, the small acts that had felt ordinary at the time but had shaped the way he saw life. And now, hearing his mother's voice through someone else's words, he realized those moments were not small at all. Later that evening, as he sat in his hotel room, Sundar called Lakshmi. Her voice came through the line, warm and familiar. "Uma, Modi ji told me everything." There was a pause on the other end. "Everything, yes," he said quietly. "And I never knew about that day when you didn't eat so I could take the bus to school." Lakshmi's breath caught. "I never wanted you to feel that burden." "Amma," Sundar said softly, "that wasn't a burden, that was love. And I think I've been trying to live my whole life in a way that earns what you gave me that day." Neither spoke for a few seconds. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, the kind that holds everything words can't carry. Before they ended the call, Lakshmi said, "Remember, Sundar, your work will touch millions, but your kindness will touch forever." When the call ended, Sundar sat for a long time, looking out at the city lights. In the quiet hum of the night, he understood something clearly. The journey was never just his. It belonged to every act of care, every sacrifice, and every lesson that had walked beside him since he was a boy, and far away, in Chennai. Lakshmi folded her sari for the evening, knowing her son's world was vast now, but his roots unshaken. Because kindness, once planted, never stops growing.